You do not have to read that much of it. So I will go over with you what I want you to know. Okay, so the autonomic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that controls things we can't control consciously, right? Like we can consciously control skeletal muscle. What is it that we can't control consciously? Cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and glands. That is exactly what's controlled by the autonomic nervous system, okay? And you guys also know the autonomic nervous system has these two divisions, right? I think we mentioned these before. Okay, so the two divisions are called sympathetic and parasympathetic. These two pretty much have the opposite effect on our organs. They pretty much have the opposite effect. Okay, so what do they do? Let's talk about the effects of these two divisions. Okay, let's start with that. Okay, so I think the best thing for you to do to remember all this stuff is to memorize one thing, and that is the sympathetic division is the fight or flight division, okay? If you just remember that, memorize sympathetic is fight or flight. You can figure everything else out because we have all had this type of response, right? We have it, unfortunately, it happens pretty often. So this is the part of the nervous system that's really designed to protect us when we are really physically threatened, like if you are, out, in the boonies at night and you're being followed or something. This is what we want to happen, right? To help us defend ourselves, run away, whatever it happens to be. So you guys know all of these effects because this part of the nervous system will kick in. Doesn't have to be that you're actually physically threatened by something. It could be just when you happen to be nervous about whatever, taking a test, right? This happens pretty much every time you have a test. Bungee jumping, whatever you do that makes you nervous. So we know that the effects would include an increased heart rate, this is heart rate, increased blood pressure, increased respiration, right? We get that sweaty palm feeling when we're nervous because it will increase the activity of sweat glands. This part of the nervous system also inhibits digestion because when we're in a fight or flight mode, we don't want to take time to go to the bathroom. You don't want to stop off, hey, I gotta go pee real quick, can you just give me a minute? Like when you're being chased. So it inhibits anything that we do not have to give priority to at that time. So this part of the nervous system actually will tighten those sphincter muscles, will inhibit digestion, inhibits the defecation and urination reflexes. That's why sometimes you get the butterfly in the stomach feeling when you're nervous because it really kind of interrupts digestion. And it also will cause the pupils to dilate. This is because a lot of times we are threatened in the dark, more so than during the day. So this will ensure that the eyes are letting more light in so we can see better. Okay. The parasympathetic is nicknamed rest and digest, and again, you want to memorize that rest and digest is parasympathetic. You can figure everything else out. Okay, so this is the part of the nervous system that really is more involved with maintaining homeostasis. Most of the time, we are in a parasympathetic mode, right, where the heart rate is lowered, blood pressure is lowered, respiration is slowed down. This part of the nervous system will stimulate digestion, stimulates the defecation and urination reflexes because, again, those are things we can give priority to when we're not in a fight or flight mode, and it will also constrict the pupils. Constriction of the pupils will also allow us to see at a distance better. Okay, so Those are the effects of the two divisions. Any questions on any of that? Most of this that we're going to go over now, most of the autonomic nervous system will only be on the written exam, okay? This is almost all just written exam material. This is also stuff that will be really important for you guys when you take physiology. You'll talk a lot about the autonomic nervous system. Because again, parasympathetic is very important for maintaining homeostasis. So you'll talk a lot about it. Okay, so this is just a diagram comparing what our motor neurons look like that are going to our skeletal muscle versus the motor neurons that are autonomic, that are going to like smooth muscle in our organs or cardiac muscle or glands. They look basically the same. Motor neurons are always multipolar, but the difference here is just where this cell body is located. Notice that here we said that the anterior horn is where our motor neurons are going to have their cell bodies, right? So these motor neurons that go out to our skeletal muscle are called somatic motor neurons. Remember, we used that term on the first day of the nervous system. We talked about somatic versus visceral. So the somatic motor neurons have their cell bodies right here in the anterior horn. I don't think they did a really great job of showing this because it's hard to see that, but the anterior horn of the gray matter, and the axon travels out on the anterior root, goes out to the muscle. Here, this is an autonomic motor neuron. We said when we were talking about the spinal cord, remember we said that those lateral horns are only present at certain levels where we have autonomic neurons. So this is the cell body of an autonomic neuron, and it is in the lateral horn, okay? Lateral horn instead of the anterior. But the axon still travels out on the anterior root of the spinal nerve, and it's going to go out to smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, or glands. Okay, so they look almost the same as our somatic motor neurons. And this is just a table that compares the somatic to the autonomic. Just, FYI, kind of puts everything there in a table. So for these autonomic neurons, whether we're talking about sympathetic or parasympathetic, it actually is very simple. This is a 2-neuron pathway, okay? Whether we're talking about sympathetic or parasympathetic, 2 neurons involved. So notice this first neuron is going to go from somewhere in the CNS, and you can see again, they're putting the cell body in the lateral horn of the gray matter. Okay, so the first neuron goes from the central nervous system to a ganglion. You guys know that a ganglion is just a collection of neuron cell bodies, right? So this is where this first neuron goes, and it synapses here on the second neuron. The second neuron goes from the ganglion to the organ, okay? And that's it. It's just that easy. So this first neuron is called the preganglionic because it's before the ganglion. Okay, so preganglionic, neuron, okay, this whole thing. And this neuron is the postganglionic neuron. And that will be true for sympathetic and parasympathetic. Okay? Okay. So what I want you guys to know for these 2 divisions is really just where these are located. Okay, so we'll talk about, for each division, we'll talk about where the preganglionic neurons are located, like where they have their cell bodies, and then we'll talk about where their ganglia are. And that's it. Okay? That's all you have to know. It's really not that much. So for the autonomic nervous system, just to recap, this is abbreviated ANS. You need to know the effects of the 2 divisions. And again, if you memorize that sympathetic is nicknamed what? Fight or flight. You can figure out the effects, okay? Parasympathetic is nicknamed rest and digest. Okay, you can figure out the effects. Okay, then I want you to know, none of these seem to work very well today. Then I want you to know where the preganglionic neurons are. And you'll understand what I mean when we go over this. Okay? You want to know where the ganglia are. And then the last thing is super easy because almost all of these neurons secrete acetylcholine, but one of the groups does not. Okay, so the neurotransmitters that these secrete. Okay, so we're gonna take a break. Let's come back at 8:40 and we will talk about where the neurons and the ganglia are located for the two divisions.